Hello, this is Michael Coyote from the USDA. I would like to thank Catherine Welsh for giving me this opportunity to talk about my agency, the Animal Plant Health Inspection Service. I'm the small business coordinator and a contracting officer with the agency. I've been involved with purchasing for the last 12, 13 years. So we'll just jump right in and talk a little bit about the agency. Our mission is basically to protect agricultural crops and livestock from diseases and pests. So how do we do that? We have three primary APHIS mission areas: plant protection quarantine, veterinary services, and wildlife services. So what do they do? What do they do? What do they buy for plant protection and quarantine? So when we protect plants, we're specifically protecting them against insect infestations and disease infestations. A lot of these things originate from overseas as invasive species or diseases that have already had an outbreak somewhere else, and they come in on container ships that we have a presence at the port that we're constantly inspecting and making sure that we can catch these things before they become a problem in our agricultural fields. So we'll give you an example. This is a Mexican fruit fly. So these little critters can basically destroy orchards of fruit relatively quickly if left uncontrolled. So how do we control them? Well, we actually are a science-based organization, and we have a number of laboratories around the country that study these types of pests. In this particular case, this has been studied already to the extent that we know how to control these, and we do the control by literally manufacturing sterile fruit flies and releasing them into the wild so that they can mate with the native populations and knock the population down, since the native flies will no longer be able to produce babies. And we do that by creating these fruit flies in a factory type setting by adding specific things for their diet so that they can be grown from scratch or initial eggs, let's say. And I've been to one of these facilities. We have two. One's down in Guatemala and one is in Texas, because these Mexican fruit flies basically come up from Central America and Mexico. And so we're controlling populations down there. We have an agreement with Guatemala and Mexico to do such control. And we have the control along the border states from basically all the way from Florida to California. So we produce these things in a laboratory, and then we release them via aerial services, literally out of the back of airplanes or helicopters, to drop sterilized pupae into the fields. So our scientists have figured out all this stuff, but in order to maintain this whole system, we need contractors to work with our facilities to keep them operating. And we need things from janitorial services to construction services to facility maintenance services, and anything that it takes to basically run a factory. So that's how we deal with flies and insects when they come in. And so there's also a lot of other things that we need in a situation like this, which is traps, lures, so that we can determine where these infestations occur. And we're constantly monitoring agriculture out in the field, especially when we get reports of these types of infestations. So veterinary services, what do they do? What do they buy? Well, veterinary services are the ones who are dealing with animal diseases. So if anyone remembers the bird flu outbreak a few years ago, it really hit the states of Minnesota and Iowa hard. I'm a native Minnesotan, and we had to deal with all sorts of turkeys and chickens that needed to be euthanized and disposed of with barn cleanup, um, and really a lot of hauling and cleaning were the contractor roles to deal with these types of animal removals. And it's really sad to see that these farmers who have put all this effort into raising these birds really we're losing their whole flocks because of a disease outbreak. But if we don't control these things right away when they show up, then it's a problem for agriculture all along. And these diseases generally show up from overseas. And it's a similar situation when we get one of these animal diseases. We have a science-based laboratory, a couple of them, in fact. We have one of our main ones, if anyone's ever driven on I-35 in Ames, Iowa, there's a big USDA facility there, and we need all sorts of contract supplies, laboratory equipment, and it's a big facility again, construction and facility maintenance services, that sort of thing that we need at this particular facility in Ames. And then nearby in Kansas, we are transitioning to a new facility, a National Bio and Agro Defense Facility, which is going to be, well, it's being built right now in Manhattan, Kansas, and you can go up to our website and see what some of the opportunities might be here. Certainly we have our design and construction already ongoing, but they may need additional support services. They're going to need to outfit this laboratory. We're actually moving this facility from Plum Island, which is off of Long Island in New York, and we're going to need a lot of trucking services that are capable of moving some of our facility from out there to Kansas. And so a lot of these things, when they show up, will be posted on betasam.gov as solicitation opportunities. Wildlife services. What do they do? What do they buy? Here's an example of a wild feral hog situation. These particular critters can destroy fields overnight. They also can interact with cattle in not so good ways. The picture down in the lower right is orchards that they've just kind of chomped on the bark to kill the trees. This is a big ongoing problem in many of the southern states. Nebraska, actually, it's a good success story because our folks in Nebraska have been able to eliminate feral hogs, even though they continue watching the populations in neighboring states like Kansas and Missouri. I mean, there's a big outbreak in Texas, Oklahoma. And so we don't want these feral hogs to come back to Nebraska. And so we're constantly vigilant so that these things don't show up. But it's just another example of what kind of a problem we have ongoing out there that our group APHIS is trying to solve. And in order to deal with something like this, we need to buy a number of supplies. I mean, we buy a lot of ATVs. So if there's any ATV dealers out there, talk to me, because it's an ongoing purchase. When we have the money to essentially get out in the field and buy what we need, we've bought bait for these things, i.e. corn cobs so that we can attract them and then trap them. We buy traps. And we actually do some culling of these herds with night scopes. And so we're constantly buying ammunition to deal with certain things like this. Another one of our areas for wildlife services is research. And so whenever we have problems, like in our PPQ group or like in our veterinary services group, we have a laboratory that is very focused on looking at techniques to control certain critter interactions with livestock or crops. Like in the state of Nebraska, coyotes have been an ongoing issue. If we're up in Montana, grizzly bears are becoming more of an issue down on the plains and in the farms. So we're constantly looking for effective ways to not necessarily lethally deal with these kinds of problems, but in many cases, that is how we have to work to eliminate some of these issues. So we have a lab or basically a research center in Fort Collins, Colorado, that is very focused on coming up with different techniques. And so if anyone's got any innovations that they'd like to share, we also have a program that supports innovative ideas with grants. So if anyone's got that, feel free to give me a call and we can chat more. So USDA actually has a website, our Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization website, that releases our procurement forecasts this time of year at the beginning of the fiscal year, and then at the midpoint of the fiscal year, we have an updated forecast. So at about the time of this conference, you should be looking at our OSTBU website to see whether or not the new procurement forecasts have been released. The website, it's very straightforward. On the left-hand side, you can see where our popular topics are. Our forecasts are just a link away. There's 9 buying agencies, and they're separated by NAICS codes. So if you have a specific NAICS code that your business operates on, or several NAICS codes, you can search these forecasts by NAICS codes. You can also look at our subcontracting directory if you would like to approach larger businesses that need to have subcontractors to meet their subcontracting goal for small business. That's another potential opportunity that you can find on this OSTBU website. Now, speaking of federal forecast for procurement, this is a relatively new site that came out in 2019 by the Public or the Professional Services Council.org, which is a lobbying group in DC. They decided that they were going to rate all the procurement forecasts that are out there. And it's not a comprehensive list, but it's a pretty good list for the main federal government forecasts that are out there. And they've rated them, color-coded them as good versus needs improvement versus, wait a minute, you guys are supposed to have a forecast by federal regulation and we don't see it, where is it? But if you go to this particular website, you can see 59 particular forecasts. And the reason why I bring this up is if you're interested in federal government work, if you go to the bottom of this page, the second link from the bottom brings up a spreadsheet with all the forecast links. Like our OSTBU site will be on there, but all the forecast links for all these different federal agencies are consolidated on one spreadsheet, it'll save you a lot of time looking for where these opportunities in the federal government actually are. And now, at the beginning of the fiscal year, is the time to be looking. So if anyone has any questions or need any more information, or would even like to talk about your business and set up a matchmaking session with me, feel free to just send me an email and we can talk more. And I'd be happy to chat with anyone who thinks that they have something that we might be able to use. But I encourage you to go to those forecasts first to see the types of things that we buy and what we're looking at buying in fiscal year 2021.